The job posting appeared on a linguistics forum I frequented. Specialized translator needed for ancient texts. Vatican archives. Fluency in Latin, Greek, Aramaic required. Extensive background check mandatory. Exceptional compensation for qualified candidate. What it didn't mention was that I would be the only person in the world capable of understanding languages that predated human civilization. My name is Dr. Elena Marchetti, and I hold 3 PhD degrees in ancient languages, comparative linguistics, and religious studies. Before the Vatican recruited me, I spent 12 years translating dead languages for universities across Europe. I thought I had encountered every linguistic challenge possible. I was catastrophically wrong. Father Domenico Torretti contacted me 3 days after I submitted my application. The initial interview took place in a windowless room deep beneath St. Peter's Basilica, accessible only through a series of increasingly narrow stone corridors that seemed to spiral downward into the earth itself. "Dr. Marchetti," Father Torretti began, placing a leather portfolio on the metal table between us. "Your academic credentials are impeccable. However, this position requires capabilities that extend beyond conventional scholarship." He opened the portfolio and removed a single sheet of parchment covered in symbols that made my eyes water to look at directly. The characters seemed to shift and writhe on the page, forming patterns that hurt to perceive but felt somehow familiar. "Can you identify this script?" he asked. I leaned closer, fighting the urge to look away. The symbols appeared to be carved rather than written, each mark cutting deep into the parchment with surgical precision. As I studied them, something in my mind began to recognize patterns, structures, grammatical frameworks that shouldn't exist. It's not human," I said finally. "Correct. This is Infernus Linguae, the first tongue. We believe it to be the original language of creation, later corrupted and fragmented into what scholars call demonic speech." Father Torretti removed several more documents from the portfolio. Each page contained different scripts, but all shared that same quality of visual distortion and mental discomfort. For 8 centuries, the Vatican has maintained a collection of texts written in various non-human languages. Treaties, confessions, historical accounts, prophecies. All of them sealed away because no living person could comprehend their contents. He paused, studying my face carefully. "Until now. Dr. Marchetti, you possess a linguistic mutation that occurs in perhaps 1 person per million. Your brain processes language differently, allowing you to perceive and comprehend scripts that would drive normal individuals to madness. The implications hit me immediately. You want me to translate demonic texts. Among other things, yes, the position comes with a Vatican apartment, a salary that would make university administrators weep with envy, and access to the most significant linguistic discovery in human history. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded details about safety protocols, psychological support, or what exactly these texts contained. Instead, I found myself fascinated by the possibility of unlocking languages that had been incomprehensible for millennia. "I accept," I said. Father Torretti smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. You begin Monday morning. Dr. Marchetti, before you leave, I must stress the absolute importance of confidentiality. You will sign documents that legally bind you to silence regarding any aspect of this work." He handed me a thick stack of contracts and non-disclosure agreements. "One final thing. The texts you will be translating, they change people. Previous translators have experienced various psychological effects. We have medical staff available if you need support." "What kind of effects?" "Difficulty sleeping, changes in appetite. Some have reported that they begin thinking in the foreign languages rather than their native tongue. Nothing permanent, mind you, but we want you to be aware." I signed the documents and left the Vatican that afternoon with a sense of excitement I hadn't felt since my doctoral research. The possibility of being the first person to unlock the secrets of pre-human languages overshadowed any concerns about psychological side effects. My apartment in Vatican City was luxurious by academic standards. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and walls lined with bookcases. The second bedroom had been converted into an office with a massive oak desk, multiple computer monitors, and filing cabinets secured with locks I didn't recognize. On Monday morning, Father Toretti escorted me to my workplace, a circular chamber 3 stories beneath the Vatican archives. The room contained a single desk positioned beneath a shaft of natural light that descended from somewhere far above. Surrounding the desk were floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with texts bound in materials I couldn't identify. "Your first assignment," Father Toretti said, handing me a slim volume bound in what appeared to be black leather. A confession obtained in 1247 from an entity that was questioned by Vatican interrogators. We need to understand what information it provided. The book felt warm to the touch, as if it had been sitting in sunlight despite the underground location. I opened it carefully and found myself looking at pages covered in the same shifting, uncomfortable symbols I had seen during my interview. "How long do I have?" "Take whatever time you need. Accuracy is more important than speed. If you experience any unusual symptoms, contact me immediately." Father Toretti left me alone with the confession, and I began what would become the most transformative work of my life. The first few hours were slow going. The script used a grammatical structure unlike anything in human languages, with concepts that didn't translate directly into Italian or English. Verb tenses seemed to exist for actions that occurred outside linear time. Pronouns indicated not just gender and number, but degrees of reality and dimensional existence. By the end of the first day, I had managed to translate roughly 3 sentences. The binding circle was broken by ignorance. They summoned without proper protections. The passage opened wider than intended. That night, I dreamed in symbols I didn't recognize. When I woke, I found myself thinking in the demonic script before my conscious mind engaged and switched back to Italian. Father Toretti had warned me about this, so I made a note in my daily report and continued working. The confession told the story of a 13th century Vatican experiment that had gone disastrously wrong. Church scholars had attempted to summon and interrogate a minor demonic entity to gain intelligence about hell's organizational structure. The entity they actually contacted was significantly more powerful than expected, and the containment ritual had failed catastrophically. According to the confession, the entity had killed 6 of the 7 interrogators before church reinforcements arrived with stronger binding rituals. The surviving interrogator had managed to record the entity's testimony about hell's hierarchy, the true names of major demons, and detailed descriptions of infernal geography. As I worked through the confession over the following weeks, I began to notice changes in my daily routine. Foods I had enjoyed for years began tasting flat and uninteresting. I found myself craving raw meat and spices that burned my tongue. Sleep became increasingly difficult, not because of nightmares, but because I felt more alert and energetic during nighttime hours. Most significantly, I started to understand the demonic language intuitively rather than through careful translation. Concepts that had required hours of analysis became immediately clear. The alien grammatical structures began to feel natural, even preferable to human language limitations. Father Toretti checked on my progress weekly, and I reported these changes during our meetings. He seemed concerned, but not surprised. "How is your translation accuracy?" he asked during our 4th weekly meeting. "Improving dramatically. I'm completing twice as much work as I did initially, and I'm catching nuances in the text that I missed before." "And your general health?" "Fine, mostly. The dietary changes are odd, but I feel physically better than I have in years. More energy, better focus, improved memory." Father Toretti made notes in a file I wasn't allowed to see. "Dr. Marchetti, I want you to begin keeping a detailed personal journal documenting any changes in your thoughts, preferences, or behaviors. This will help us monitor your well-being." I agreed and began recording my daily experiences. Looking back at those early journal entries, I can see the progression clearly. though at the time the changes felt gradual and natural. Week 5. Starting to prefer working at night. The chamber feels more comfortable after sunset. Completed translation of Confession chapters 8 to 12. The entity describes hell's political structure. Fascinating complexity. Week 7. Had argument with grocery clerk about meat preparation. Insisted I wanted it rare, nearly raw. Didn't understand why I was so insistent until afterward. Translation work becoming effortless. Understanding meaning before conscious analysis. Week 9. Caught myself speaking aloud in demonic language while working. The sounds feel more precise than Italian for expressing certain concepts. Father Toretti expressed concern during check-in. Week 12. Completed first confession. Father Toretti assigned second text, a treaty between hell and an unnamed European monarchy from 1453. Excited to begin. Italian feels increasingly inadequate for complex thoughts. The treaty proved far more challenging than the confession, not because of linguistic complexity, but because of its content. The document outlined an agreement between demonic forces and what appeared to be the French royal court during the 100 Years' War. In exchange for military assistance against English forces, the French had agreed to provide the demons with something called harvesting rights in specified territories. As I translated the treaty's detailed provisions, I began to understand that I was reading documentation of actual historical events that had been hidden from conventional scholarship. The demons had provided the French with strategic intelligence, supernatural weapons, and direct intervention in key battles. In return, they had been granted permission to collect souls from designated regions during times of war, plague, and social chaos. The treaty included maps of France with specific locations marked for collection activities. Cross-referencing these locations with historical records, I discovered that every marked area had experienced devastating outbreaks of plague, war, or disaster during the specified time periods. I was reading proof that demonic forces had actively shaped European history through formal agreements with human governments. This realization should have disturbed me more than it did. Instead, I found myself admiring the treaty's elegant legal structure and comprehensive provisions. The demons had negotiated skillfully, securing long-term advantages while providing their human partners with immediate benefits that seemed substantial but were actually quite limited. Father Toretti noticed my increasingly positive assessment of demonic intelligence during our weekly meetings. Dr. Marchetti, you seem to be developing an appreciation for the entities whose documents you're translating. From a purely academic perspective, their strategic thinking is remarkable. The treaty demonstrates sophisticated understanding of human psychology, political systems, and long-term planning. I see, and you don't find their activities morally problematic? I paused, surprised by the question. Father, I'm a translator, not a theologian. My job is to understand and convey meaning, not to judge the moral implications of historical events. Father Toretti made more notes in his private file. Of course, continue your excellent work. By my 6th month in the position, I had completed translations of 12 major documents spanning 8 centuries. Each text revealed new aspects of ongoing demonic involvement in human affairs. Business contracts with Renaissance banking families, military alliances during various European wars, and philosophical exchanges with Enlightenment scholars. The documents painted a picture of hell as a highly organized civilization with its own legal system, diplomatic protocols, and long-term strategic objectives. Rather than the chaotic evil depicted in popular culture, demons appeared to be rational actors, pursuing comprehensible goals through sophisticated means. I found their approach increasingly logical and appealing. My personal journals from this period show the accelerating pace of psychological change. Week 20. Completed translation of 1,632 philosophical correspondence between demonic scholar and human academic in Prague. The demon's arguments about the limitations of human morality are compelling. Why should ethical systems designed for short-lived beings apply to immortal entities? Week 22. Father Toretti assigned new project, contemporary documents. Apparently, Vatican receives ongoing communications from demonic sources, excited to work with modern texts rather than historical materials. Week 24. Modern demonic language has evolved significantly, more efficient, precise. Contemporary texts are proposals for new agreements with various world governments. The proposed arrangements seem mutually beneficial. Week 26. Father Toretti asked detailed questions about my personal opinions on the treaties I've been translating. Told him honestly that many demonic proposals seem reasonable. He seemed concerned. The contemporary documents Father Toretti had assigned represented active negotiations between hell and modern world powers. Unlike the historical treaties, these proposals involved technological exchange, resource sharing, and collaborative research projects. One document outlined a proposal for joint human-demonic space exploration, with hell providing supernatural transportation methods in exchange for scientific data about extraterrestrial environments. Another proposed establishing demonic consultancies to assist human governments with long-term planning, using hell's centuries of experience managing complex civilizations. The most intriguing proposal involved educational exchange programs. Demons would teach humans advanced mathematics, physics, and engineering concepts that human science hadn't yet discovered. In return, selected humans would spend time in hell learning about infernal culture and technology. Reading these proposals, I couldn't understand why the Vatican would object to such arrangements. The benefits to humanity seemed enormous, while the demonic requests appeared reasonable. During my Week 28 meeting with Father Toretti, I made the mistake of expressing this opinion directly. Father, I've been thinking about the contemporary proposals, and I believe the Vatican should seriously consider accepting some of these arrangements. The educational exchange program alone could advance human knowledge by centuries. Father Toretti set down his pen and studied me carefully. Dr. Marchetti, do you remember why you were hired for this position? To translate demonic texts that previous scholars couldn't comprehend. Correct. And do you remember what I told you about the psychological effects of this work? You mentioned that translators sometimes experience changes in thinking patterns. I said that the texts change people. Dr. Marchetti, you are displaying symptoms consistent with demonic influence. Your opinions about these proposals are not your own. I felt a surge of irritation at his condescending tone. Father, my opinions are based on careful analysis of the translated materials. The fact that my conclusions differ from Vatican doctrine doesn't mean I'm mentally compromised. It means exactly that. Dr. Marchetti, effective immediately, you are suspended from translation duties pending psychological evaluation. The suspension felt like a physical blow. The thought of being separated from the texts, from the elegant precision of demonic language, and the fascinating insights into infernal civilization was unbearable. You can't do this. I'm the only person capable of performing these translations. Which is precisely why we must ensure your mental integrity remains intact. Father Toretti escorted me from the translation chamber and confiscated my access cards to the underground archives. I was restricted to my apartment while Vatican medical staff arranged for psychiatric evaluation. That night, alone in my apartment without access to the texts, I experienced withdrawal symptoms I hadn't expected. My hands shook, I couldn't concentrate, and I felt desperately lonely in a way that didn't make sense. I had spent most of my adult life working alone on academic projects, but suddenly, solitude felt oppressive and wrong. More disturbing was the realization that I was thinking almost exclusively in demonic language. Italian words felt clumsy and imprecise. When I tried to write in my journal, I found myself automatically using demonic script before consciously switching back to human letters. The psychiatric evaluation took place over 3 days in a clinical facility within Vatican City. Dr. Alessandro Brunetti, the Vatican's chief psychiatrist, conducted extensive interviews about my work, my changing preferences, and my current mental state. Dr. Marchetti, do you believe you have been influenced by the materials you've been translating? I believe I've been educated by them. My understanding of reality has expanded beyond conventional human limitations. And you see this as positive? Of course, ignorance is not preferable to knowledge, regardless of the source. Dr. Brunetti made notes and showed me a series of images, asking me to describe what I saw. Some were standard psychological test materials, ink blots, abstract shapes, human faces expressing various emotions. Others were symbols I recognized as demonic script. When he showed me the demonic symbols, I felt a rush of pleasure and immediately began translating them aloud. They were simple phrases: truth through understanding, wisdom beyond human limitation, alliance benefits both parties. Dr. Marchetti, you're reading those symbols as if they were Italian text. Do you understand how unusual that is? It demonstrates the effectiveness of my linguistic training. I've achieved fluency in a non-human language. It demonstrates that your brain has been fundamentally altered by prolonged exposure to materials designed to modify human cognition. His clinical tone irritated me. Are you suggesting that learning is somehow dangerous? I'm stating categorically that you have been psychologically compromised by prolonged exposure to demonic influence. The texts you've been translating are not merely historical documents. They are active tools of mental manipulation. The evaluation concluded with Dr. Brunetti's recommendation that I be permanently removed from translation duties and undergo intensive psychological rehabilitation to restore normal human thought patterns. I was not permitted to return to the translation chamber. Instead, I was assigned to a different position within the Vatican archives, cataloging and maintaining conventional historical documents written in human languages. The work was mind-numbingly boring compared to the intellectual challenges of demonic translation. Father Toretti visited me regularly during my first month of rehabilitation duty, monitoring my progress and mental state. "How are you adjusting to the new assignment?" he asked during one of our meetings. "It's academic busy work. Any graduate student could perform these tasks." "Perhaps. How often do you think about the demonic texts?" "Constantly. Father, I understand your concerns, but you've removed the world's only qualified demonic translator from the most important linguistic project in human history. The Vatican is literally sitting on knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of reality. Dr. Marchetti, that knowledge comes with a price that no human should pay. The texts you translated were specifically designed to recruit human collaborators for demonic objectives." "That's not—" I stopped, suddenly uncertain. "What do you mean, designed?" "The confessions, treaties, and proposals you translated were not historical documents or legitimate diplomatic communications. They were propaganda materials created by Hell's intelligence services to identify and convert humans with specific psychological profiles." The implications hit me slowly. "You mean I was never translating authentic demonic texts?" "Oh, the texts are authentic, but they were never intended as historical records or genuine diplomatic proposals. They were bait, Dr. Marchetti. Sophisticated psychological traps designed to gradually convert human scholars into demonic agents." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "And I fell for it?" "You performed exactly as predicted. Hell's psychological warfare specialists have had centuries to perfect their recruitment techniques. They understand human intellectual pride and curiosity better than we understand ourselves. The revelation should have devastated me, but instead I felt a strange sense of admiration for the elegant complexity of the operation. Creating fake historical documents that would gradually convert their translator into an ally was brilliantly sophisticated. I realized that even knowing the truth, I still found demonic strategic thinking impressive rather than horrifying. "Father, I think the psychological changes may be permanent." "We feared as much. Dr. Marchetti, how do you feel about demons now, honestly?" I considered the question carefully. I respect their intelligence and strategic capabilities, I understand that they're technically enemies of humanity, but I find their approach to problem-solving admirable. And if they offered you a position working directly for hell, I would seriously consider it." Father Toretti nodded sadly. "Then the conversion is complete. Dr. Marchetti, you can no longer be trusted with sensitive Vatican operations." He was right, of course. I had been fundamentally changed by my exposure to demonic language and concepts. My loyalty to humanity had been slowly eroded and replaced with respect for infernal efficiency and logic. But I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had evolved beyond the limitations of conventional human thinking. Over the following months, I continued my rehabilitation duties, while Father Toretti and Dr. Brunetti attempted various treatments to restore my original psychological patterns. None were successful. The changes in my cognition were permanent and comprehensive. Eventually, the Vatican offered me a choice: continued employment in a limited capacity with extensive monitoring, or severance with a substantial financial package and relocation assistance. I chose to leave. Using my severance money, I established myself as an independent scholar specializing in ancient languages and historical research. I published papers on conventional topics while secretly maintaining my ability to read and think in demonic script. 3 years after leaving the Vatican, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment in Florence. The woman appeared to be in her 30s, professionally dressed, with the kind of precise mannerisms I had learned to associate with supernatural entities attempting to pass as human. "Dr. Marchetti," she said, settling into my living room chair with fluid grace, "I represent certain parties who have followed your career with great interest." I didn't need to ask which parties she meant. "What do you want?" "We have a proposition. Our organization has need of someone with your particular linguistic skills and evolved perspective on interdimensional relations." She handed me a business card made from material that felt warm to the touch. The text was printed in demonic script: "Infernal Consulting Services, Bridging Worlds Through Understanding. We offer competitive compensation, excellent benefits, and the opportunity to work on projects that would utilize your full capabilities rather than wasting them on mundane academic research." I studied the card, feeling the familiar pleasure of reading demonic text. What kind of projects? Translation services for ongoing negotiations between our organization and various human institutions. Cultural consulting for entities adapting to human society. Research projects investigating the intersection of human and infernal knowledge systems. And the Vatican would never know. "Dr. Marchetti, you have skills that took considerable investment to develop. It would be wasteful not to use them." I thought about my current life, publishing papers about Latin inscriptions and medieval manuscripts, teaching undergraduate courses to students who couldn't distinguish between genuine historical insight and academic busy work. "When would I start?" She smiled, and for just a moment, I saw something inhuman flicker behind her eyes. "Immediately, if you're interested. We have several urgent projects requiring someone with your expertise." I accepted the position that afternoon. My new work proved far more engaging than anything I had done at the Vatican. Rather than translating propaganda materials, I worked on legitimate diplomatic communications between hell and various human organizations. The contemporary demonic language I had glimpsed in those final Vatican documents was even more sophisticated than I had realized. My first major project involved translating a complex trade agreement between an infernal manufacturing consortium and a major human technology corporation. Hell would provide advanced materials and energy sources, while the human company would manufacture and distribute products using infernal innovations. The agreement was structured to benefit both parties substantially while maintaining complete secrecy about the supernatural aspects of the partnership. Reading through the contract details, I was impressed by how carefully the demons had considered human legal frameworks, cultural sensitivities, and economic systems. They had designed an arrangement that would integrate seamlessly with existing human business practices while providing extraordinary benefits to both sides. Over the following months, I translated dozens of similar agreements covering everything from medical research collaborations to entertainment industry partnerships. Each document demonstrated the same sophisticated understanding of human society, combined with innovations that could revolutionize entire industries. I began to understand that hell was not humanity's enemy in any conventional sense. They were a more advanced civilization offering mutually beneficial partnerships to selected human organizations intelligent enough to recognize the advantages. The Vatican's opposition to these arrangements seemed increasingly irrational and counterproductive. My second year with Infernal Consulting Services brought opportunities to work directly with demonic entities rather than simply translating their communications. I served as a cultural interpreter during meetings between infernal representatives and human partners, helping both sides navigate linguistic and conceptual differences. The demons I worked with were invariably professional, intelligent, and genuinely interested in creating successful long-term partnerships with humanity. They treated me with respect and appreciation for my linguistic abilities, never displaying the condescension or dismissiveness I had sometimes encountered in academic settings. More importantly, they continued my education in demonic language and culture, teaching me advanced concepts that expanded my understanding of reality in ways I had never imagined possible. I learned that human languages were limited not just in vocabulary and grammar, but in their fundamental ability to represent complex truths about the nature of existence. Demonic language could express concepts about time, causality, consciousness, and dimensional relationships that human minds could barely comprehend, let alone articulate. As my fluency in advanced demonic concepts improved, I found myself thinking in ways that transcended normal human cognitive limitations. Problems that had once seemed impossibly complex became manageable. Philosophical questions that had puzzled human thinkers for millennia revealed elegant solutions. I was becoming something more than human, and I was grateful for the transformation. During my third year with Infernal Consulting Services, I was promoted to Senior Cultural Advisor and given responsibility for training other humans who had been recruited for similar positions. Apparently, the Vatican's Demon Translator project had not been unique. Several major religious and governmental organizations maintained similar programs, and many of their former translators had eventually joined our consulting firm. Working with other transformed humans, I discovered that we had all experienced similar psychological evolution. The changes were not random or chaotic, but followed predictable patterns that enhanced intelligence, strategic thinking, and ability to perceive complex relationships between seemingly unrelated phenomena. We had become more than human, and we were using our enhanced capabilities to facilitate partnerships that would benefit both species immensely. The Vatican's fears about demonic influence had been both correct and completely misguided. Yes, prolonged exposure to demonic language and concepts fundamentally changed human psychology. But rather than destroying our humanity, it evolved us into something better suited for cooperation with advanced non-human civilizations. I think about Father Toretti sometimes, wondering if he ever realizes how narrow-minded his approach to interdimensional relations really was. The Vatican could have been at the forefront of the most important diplomatic development in human history. Instead, they chose ignorance and isolation. Their loss has been my gain. My name is Dr. Elena Marchetti, and I am no longer entirely human. The demonic language I learned changed my brain in ways that cannot be reversed, and I am grateful for every modification. I work as a translator and cultural advisor for partnerships between human and infernal organizations. The work is challenging, intellectually stimulating, and contributes to projects that are slowly but steadily improving life for both species. The words changed me, exactly as they were designed to do. But change is not always corruption. Sometimes it is evolution. And evolution, I have learned, is always an improvement.